investors want to know that all this is thought out.
Kind of want to play big, not look like a startup. What makes the difference? How do you look more professional?
Again, it's everybody rowing in the same direction, and people don't affect.
Welcome to the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Dave Brown, and I'm here with Rushford Lee from REDKOR, and we're talking about branding. So can you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what branding is?
Yeah, I would love to. Rushford Lee, REDKOR Brands, we've been in business almost 30 years, and we've done over 500 brands. I think branding is a lot broader topic. I mean, typically someone thinks that's a logo, and that would be the very least of what a brand is. So we think of branding from what is your culture branding?
Yeah.
What is your marketing branding? What is your messaging branding? And then, of course, what is your physical branding? What does everything look like? And I think we've gotten good at doing that. But I think branding is such a larger topic than typically it's not somebody who does logos.
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of your clients are people like my office would be where we've done a little bit of branding here and there, but not in a cohesive way. So you go in and analyze that. Is that like a standard project?
Yeah, it starts. As a matter of fact, two professors who were here at BYU, David Whitlock, Gary Rhodes, had helped us to develop research that would help us to do a better job in our visual branding, but we also saw that it helped us tremendously in understanding the consumer, their customer, and then that could be, with a little added stuff, could help us with understanding what are the attributes and benefits people are looking for from the company that we're doing work with. So it all starts with research, and then with the right questions gives us a lot of information that we can help them bring it all together into one place.
And how do you do that research?
Usually it's through online type surveys, just because it's faster, quicker. We don't always do focus groups. We found in some ways those are easily to push one way or the other.
Yeah.
So we would try to get out to 300, 400, 500 customers and get their feedback. So we have a little both quantitative and qualitative. We ask 2 or 3 open-ended questions, and from there we get things like testimonials, and we think we get the real golden stuff from that research.
Yeah.
So.
Well, great. Well, I've seen some of your projects, and you can see the results of branding being successful. But so these are mostly companies where they have thousands of customers, and so you can identify a few hundred. But what about a brand new startup company? Say you're just launching a business. What should you be thinking about with branding?
I think one of the important things is to understand who your customer is. The hardest thing, if you don't really know who they are, then it's really hard to go out, ask questions, and so forth. So I would say for a brand new company, isolate and understand who are your real customers. Are they female from 30 to 55? What are they, and how do you know? And if you don't know that, then a lot of the marketing, messaging, even culture you develop is going to go the wrong way. So that would be the first thing. Once you have that, then you can create panels. So if we said we know the demographic, we know the location, then let's create a panel and start to go out and ask them questions about what they think. What are their attributes, benefits, what emotions drive them to buy your product?
And so can you give us a hypothetical? What if you're, let's pick a product, say like it's a children's toy and it's safe for little kids, and so maybe you discover that parents like it because of the safety feature. How does that then translate into branding?
I think part of that, if let's say we did that and we found the top 5 or 6 things that are really important to them, and the one was safety, then in your packaging, of course, you can bring across that safety, but maybe even in the name and the way you create the brand, the identity itself, the colors, the logo. Can it bring across safety if that was the most important thing that they were really looking at? And that all can be done. And if you can look at a brand mark and you can start to understand what the story is, you're a lot further off than someone going, I don't get it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So it informs all your decisions. And you mentioned these culture decisions that organizations make. So I've seen guides before where it's how we answer the phone in our organization, or the 3 messages we're trying to get out in casual conversations. What are some examples of culture things you might have?
I think those are 2 good examples. Who are we? What do we stand for? What's our message? What do we look like? How should we represent ourselves? How do we treat our customers? All of those can be part of the culture end of it, and we try to put that across in a visual way also. I think the best way to look at it is if you could get all your management, all your employees, if you could get all your customers and your vendors on the same lake in the same boat, rowing in the same direction with a little bit of swing, what benefits does that bring to your company? And I think especially if it's a brand new company, people are kind of all over the place, And even if you can get vendors who are coming in to help you to understand who you are, what you stand for, what you look like, then it can go a lot better.
And is this what people experts mean by community-driven branding, where you're looking at what the customers are feeling and basing it on that?
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense. What is it we're going to communicate to a customer that's going to interest him? And you can spend a lot of money trying different things. They don't work. A year goes by, 2 years go by. But if you've found out ahead of time what they're really interested, why they're interested, and how they talk about it, then in your advertising materials, your brand, your messaging, your culture, all of that can come across.
Mm-hmm. So for a startup company, say you're an entrepreneur, you've just launched something, you have a theory of who the customer will be, since you might not have customers yet, and you've probably done some validation. Hopefully you have some ideas. So you might follow a specific line of branding. Have you ever seen a company have to then change course later and redefine their branding because the customer's not who they thought they were?
Yeah, I would say most, actually. Yeah, I think most of them will, because as a guy who's in my late 50s, I don't think like a young person. I don't think like a woman. I have 5 daughters. I know I don't think like a woman. So I'd rather hear what they have to say and what language do they use. I think the biggest mistake with companies who start up is they think they know.
Right.
And it doesn't, if you go out for a campaign and you spend money to do that for 6 months or a year and you find out it's wrong, it would have been a lot cheaper just to go out and talk to your customers and find out what they think and whether they like it or whether they don't. And then you're off on a better start. You're rowing in the same direction. Everybody, you know, and you're in the right place.
Okay, great. When you look at companies that we'd be familiar with, say major companies, Coca-Cola, whoever, what's one that really gets branding right, in your opinion?
Well, those are good examples. I think companies want to change their branding, and if you've already built equity, like you would never see Coca-Cola change its brand.
Right.
And if it did, it might fail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a family member. I sometimes like Campbell's soups. What color is Campbell's soup?
Right. It's the red can.
It's red, and you visualize it. It's like a member of your family. And so I think that's where you don't want to have to change it. You want to do a good job. One of our challenges is if we do a great job branding a company, they're not going to talk to us again for 10 years or 15 years. They don't need us.
Yeah.
So that's why training about the brand, doing culture, building a marketing plan for a year for them that brings all the pieces together. And those are things that we want to do to help them be consistent and train them to get that message out. And then review it every year, but review it with research and with statistics that have came back from your sales. Hopefully you've been keeping track of who bought what for what reason.
Yeah, so a lot of your customers, REDKOR's customers, are going to be companies that realize their branding's not great. And so what are some typical things that happen where a company looks at itself and says, ooh, we've got to fix some branding here?
A good example, down in Las Vegas, we have a client down there, fencing specialist. They're really good at doing fencing. How dramatic is that? Yeah. Romantic, it's not. Yeah. But by raising their brand above their competitors, now they're getting a lot more attention. And people see their trucks, they see all of that. That helps them to take what they've become really good at, building fences, but then exposing them to more people, raising sales, raising awareness. Even like Clyde companies, their project was, we've got 6, 7, 8 different companies, but we'd like them to be able to build off the Clyde equity. So how do we unite all those brands together into a consistent brand? So when you see a truck, for out there for Geneva Rock, or you see one out there for Sun Rock, they look like they're in the same family, and they have that Clyde endorsement on the back with 100 years of experience. And so even larger companies will do some of that. And the goal is not to, if they've got great equity, don't lose that. Don't lose the equity they've already built.
Well, so every brand you just mentioned, I'm familiar with. I've seen it, and I don't know how I'm familiar with it, and I'm not sure I've ever bought their products. How do brands communicate with us so that we subliminally just know who they are?
I think so often we don't think we can look at a brand and we look at it and it makes us feel uncomfortable. It's like, that's kind of hokey. Yeah. Or they don't look like they really have their act together. They look like they're a startup. Or you can look at a company, and one of the biggest things is it easy to read. We do a lot of city branding, and one of the big mistakes there is I've seen some logos recently that I thought the creative was good, but I can't read the logo on the side of a vehicle from a half a block away. So there's some things like that that help to extend the brand, have people see it, and have them understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And some of it's just discipline. We get creative and then stand back and look at it, and you can't tell what it is, then we've made a mistake.
Yeah. That's one of the key lessons from posting YouTube videos online. If they can't read the text, it doesn't matter what it says, right?
Kind of, yeah.
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 Well, good. You mentioned not looking like a startup. Imagine that you're a new entrepreneur with a startup and you kind of want to play big, not look like a startup. What makes the difference? How do you look more professional?
Communicating with that brand, kind of what you do,
Mm-hmm.
brand name that's short, so it's easy to remember. If you look on a lot of the buildings as you go up the freeway, the ones that are 5, 6 letters, you remember those.
Yeah.
That's good. Making sure it's readable, and then having the colors and the fonts, those things actually put across a message. If I have a script and I can't read it, it's like, what am I? But if it's strong and bold, lowercase means I'm friendly. All those things come into play that help us to be drawn to or pushed away from a brand. And that's, I think, for a new brand, that's really important.
Yeah, I do think if you see a long name for a business, it seems antiquated. It seems like, oh, that must be from the 1800s or something, right? So,
well, in a long brand, you can't remember, you can't read it. Usually has to be small because there's 14 letters in it. So for a lot of companies who have that, we'll try to bring out a main name, something shorter, and then if we have to, put the rest of it below. But something they'll remember.
So sometimes when an inventor creates a new technology, they'll have some idea in their mind of a clever name for it. So maybe we can get a trademark on this or something. How important is it for the name of a business to be clever versus just getting the font and colors right?
I think if the name can help tell what you do and be memorable, then a clever name can be good. If it's just cutesy, and you read it and go, I've no clue. Maybe they make blankets, or maybe they make a drink. We had a company a while ago that was a new startup, and what they did was to take the tape you put on an athlete, and they would put other things with it, and their name ended up just being 4 letters, Infuse, because it explained what we do. We infuse this with certain things. When the name can tell what you do, it's short and memorable. Oftentimes it's easier to get it. The hardest thing nowadays is, can we get the URL? Can we get it past legal? And we might start with 4 or 5 good names, and only one will get past legal. And it's the one that doesn't get past is always the one you like the most.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and often people joke about startups having all like Q's and Z's and X's in their names. How hard is it to come up with a new name that actually is going to be available?
I think it's one of the hardest things is coming up with a new name. So we'll start out and we'll brainstorm through different things. Might come back with 300, 400, 500 names. And of course we start crossing off the ridiculous, but at a point you end up with 10, 20 names that could be, then run them through a cursory search where you're looking at what's available URL, what also is out there within there, not a legal search yet. That might bring you down to 5 or 6 names that you think have a chance. And then if you send them to a lawyer, which we send them to the lawyer, they seem to just want to say no. So it's that's the hardest part is getting a good name. And the hard thing about not going through the lawyer, getting it approved, is we've had companies who came to us and said, hey, we're really doing well, but we got to cease and desist, and we have to cease and desist. So I've got to come up with a new name. What do we do? What do we look like? How do we bring this equity we've gained over? So that's somebody we would work for.
Okay.
So.
And so let's take the most kind of the worst case, probably a company that realizes its brand's just completely off kilter, like it's not connecting anymore. It needs to change. What are some of the complications there? Because it seems like if you make major branding changes, you're going to alienate some customers, right? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, we would call that probably an equity transfer. So how do we bring over the equity? Again, with some of the Clyde companies, the brands are similar to what they had before, but they're changed to where they fit into a family. If we were to lose that equity, that would be a problem. And especially if you've got good customers, you don't want to lose that. So that an equity transfer is harder than just coming up with a new logo. How do we maintain our customers, know that they know us? A good equity transfer, they would go, oh, that looks fresh. I like that, but they know it's you still.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. And I think one of the mistakes people make when they're they'll come up with great ideas about brand new things, but gosh, if you lose equity, like in a website, if you do a new website, but you lose all the people that are following, you've made a bigger mistake. So the equity transfer is fun, but it's a little bit harder.
sometimes with stores like a department store, it'll be like Bill's department store, and they'll get acquired by Mary's. And so at first for a while you'll see Bill's department by Mary's, and then eventually it's just Mary's. Is it some handoff like that? Is that how you do it?
We're doing a project, 2 of them, one out in California for an appliance company. And they started out near a location, and they named it after that location. Now they've got 12, 14 stores. They bought 2 or 3 others, and so they have 3 different names. But as they go forward, they've just kept adding names. So they've got like 6 names within their brand marks in front of their stores. And so the idea is, okay, how do we bring them along so that we can pin down a name that'll work in the future, doesn't lose too much equity, and the hardest part of that is bringing the client along. I've been in business since my grandfather did this, and his name was a part of it, but it doesn't match anymore. No one knows who we are. Yeah. And those are fun ones, and it's usually where they have a chain of stores, and they've bought several others. So,
yeah, that's an interesting reason to change because you're local. I remember when I lived in St. Louis, there was St. Louis Bread Company, but everywhere else it was Panera.
Yeah.
And is it common to have separate, different branding for different geographies?
It is. If you want to grow the company and you want to build equity in that brand, you're building equity in 2, 3, 4 brands. Yeah. That's more expensive. It's hard to advertise, hard to be consistent, and so you might have someone who owns restaurants. They own 4 or 5 different restaurants, and they're chains. They each have their own. It's kind of like Procter and Gamble. I've got 500 products out there, each with their own brand. But there's others like Federal Express where they have FedEx Ground, FedEx Air, but they want to build equity in all the FedEx products. And so it just depends on where they're going.
Okay. And what if you're a founder who says, okay, it's great that the consumers want our company to be this, but we're a value-based organization, and we're going to be, I don't know, the environmental company or whatever it is, no matter what the consumer's like. Do you see that happening? Are there companies that just decide their values independent of market choices?
I am sure there are some that are probably not dependent on customers buying their product sometimes.
Okay.
Because it's like saying, I have a product, I believe in it, but I don't care if the customer doesn't like it. I'm going to do it anyway. That might not be as successful as finding a medium ground where they like what you're doing and they understand what you're doing, and you've kept your brand culture, your brand. That's where I think it's makes the most sense.
Oh, I just thought, one other place I see rebranding a lot is, and I guess I won't name names, but every once in a while a company runs an ad that's a huge miss, and they lose brand equity. So then you see them backing up and hiring people who are very on point with what the brand used to be. Is that a common reason people would work on branding?
It could be. I think what's hard to do is our advertising, our promotion's not always our brand. Our brand supports it.
Right.
And we want to make it seem as standard and similar as possible because we want to build equity in the brand. So if we have a bad advertising campaign and that campaign really tanks, we probably shouldn't base it just around the brand. The brand should have supported it, and we can go out and make that change. If it was that bad and you have to go change the whole brand, I think you're really in trouble.
Yeah, so the mistake probably was an advertising campaign that wasn't consistent with the brand.
Correct. And it wasn't consistent with what they knew about their customers.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing, even in a class up at another university up north, I would go in and just put across the process we go, saying what are attributes, benefits, do a girls project because there's like half girls, and ask the boys what they think would be the most important attributes to the buyer, the female. They were usually so far off, and the women just laughed at them and mocked them. But I think that's the biggest mistake that even more mature companies make, is our customer changing? And if they are, who are they? Why are they changing, and what can we do to grow with them?
Yeah. Man, we see this in tech transfer at BYU all the time because we work with a lot of students. We want to be a resource for students, and we have student employees. And we found the only way to connect with them the right way is to talk to them and get their opinions, ask other students, what should we be doing here? Because every few years, the student body has different preferences. And also, we all feel like, we're kind of young-ish, but no, we're not. And we're not in their group at all, so we need to ask them.
Yeah, I think we think of branding as a visual brand mark, but in reality, it's our marketing. Do we have a branded marketing? Do we know what we're saying? Do we have branded messaging? In other words, we know what they want. We know the top 5 things they're looking for, the emotions that drive them to buy. And if everybody's on the same page, and like you've seen the playbooks, all of that's in there, Now the vendors and everybody can go the same direction. They can row the same direction. They can, have things go better.
Yeah.
But if you really don't know, you're going to spend a lot of money, what you think, and, like we've talked about. So understanding a consumer is really good.
What about a brand where there's a really strong face of the company? So Martha Stewart, is her company, or Steve Jobs, for a while, was Apple. What in those cases, do you just cater the branding around this very public figure, or are you?
If you're a Martha Stewart and you've spent billions of dollars already building that brand, and you stay with it, it might have different divisions or things. But if you're not that and you're building it around a name, sometimes we just don't have the money to build the equity around just the name. But there are companies who do that. But for a startup, everything would be better to, here's who we are, here's what we do, and make that easy to transition into.
Okay. Well, can you walk us through, Rushford, the branding process? If you were starting from scratch, you're like, our business has customers, but we've just never thought about branding. What are the first questions you ask yourself, and what does the process look like?
Well, we try to get them, again, to think of branding more than just the visual. Think of it as messaging, culture, all those things together. We start by doing a stakeholder audit internally, where we take them through an exercise of saying, what are the attributes about this company that make it special, that make it worth everything? We go through that, let them 50, 100 ideas, and then we make them put them in order. Okay, what's the number one? And they all kind of curdle because, well, I don't know.
So they're doing this as a group?
They're doing this as a group. Yeah, and a stakeholder group, and the more the better in all reality, as long as everybody who makes a decision is in there. We go through that exercise, then we say, what are the benefits you think you'll get for that product? Again, we make them put them in order. And then we start to see, well, the attributes don't match up with the benefits, and then we'll say, what do you think the emotions are that when people buy your product, what do they feel? Why are they buying? If you're Browning, why does somebody buy a gun? Oh, they want to go out and shoot something. Well, no, they really do it as a family. What's the real reason? Now you can market to that. So we do that with them. Then we take that feedback and the top 10, 12 things they've came up with in each category. Then we go out to their consumer, and we do a question that says, here's the attributes we think are some of our best attributes. Would you choose your top 3 or your bottom 3? And then we get it back in order. Number 1 attribute they love is this, number 1 benefit, and then number 1 emotion. With that from the customer, and we do mapping, I won't go and explain that, but it's a visual way of looking at that. They don't match. Yeah, the customer, what he thought and what the consumers think are 2 different things. So with that, then we've kind of got them on our side. We can design branding, marketing, messaging, culture based around what we're learning from them. So that's the first step. And then at that point, we start into, if we're doing a playbook, we start into brand itself visually. And usually that's 3 or 4 steps. We start into messaging. What are our top messaging things we should be talking about? Here they are. Here's the top 10, and here's the top 1. And we start to write messaging based around that. And then same with marketing. What's our marketing plan going to be for the next year? And how does all that affect our culture? So we can start those about the same time. Do those. We go back and forth on 2, 3 rounds, make sure everybody agrees, understands, feels good. And then we start to put it into a final visual format.
Well,
Well,
that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And that's so refreshing to hear, because in terms of product development, totally the entrepreneurial thinking today is you've got to validate as early as possible, find out what the customers actually want and create that. And so branding is essentially the same, right?
It is.
You got to make the company match the customers, not the opposite.
Yeah, it's not unusual, and you probably see this. You've got a great product, and people should want it. They don't understand it, and they don't see why it benefits them, and they don't see the value. And you haven't tried to get their emotions. You buy Browning was a good example. We had done just some testing for them, and they had some hard questions, and particularly the agency itself that they had used had gone away from the buck mark. Well, that buck mark was everything that everybody had built history around, and it's the same with, I've got a great product, but do people understand my product? They understand this, and am I communicating that quickly to them? So it's very a holistic approach to a brand. A brand is so much more than a logo.
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes it's going to be hard for scientists, for inventors, for product developers, for finance people to think about the emotions of a product.
Right.
What if and some products are hard. Like what if you're selling staplers, office staplers? What kind of emotion could possibly connect with that?
Ease of use. I don't staple my finger.
So I'm relieved it's so easy.
I'm relieved. It's easy. It's small. It fits in my case. But if we don't know that, and I think sometimes the biggest challenge is we've had companies say, well, nobody buys because of emotion. They're not buying my product because of emotion.
Yeah.
That's just a fib. Everybody buys. And even if the emotion is it was just easy to find, I like the packaging, I understood what it was. And we do a lot of packaging design, like Built Bar.
Those look nice.
And I'm trying to think, even with an ice cream, why do people buy the ice cream? Is it because they want to lose weight and so they want it to be low calorie? No, for a lot of us, we just want a really good tasting real ice cream. And that's where our market niche is at. And finding that out helps out.
Yeah, when you're talking about emotions, I'm sure you've seen the studies, but there are people who don't have emotions, who don't experience them because of some injury, brain injury or whatever. And the result of that, which was surprising when I first learned of it, is they can't make decisions. Mm-hmm. It turns out our decision making is emotional inherently. Yeah. And so you got to reach that.
It always is. And if you're going to tell an emotional story or write an emotional headline, you need to understand what the emotions are because they just won't go any further.
Yeah. So. What are some branding horror stories? What are mistakes you've seen people make?
I think we've talked about them. Do they really know their customer? Do they know what they're looking for? And does the brand communicate some of that? And this might sound really simple. Is it easy to read? Mm-hmm. Is it simple? Is it short? Those are things they make with their branding that are mistakes. I would have to say the biggest is not knowing who your customer is, because you can communicate a lot through just a logo and packaging, or logo and website if you know what they're doing. Trying to think of mistakes that we've made. I think where a customer talks to us and says, "Yeah, I already know all about my customer. We don't need to do this," right. And then we go, "Well, we really want to." "Well, no, I just want you to go do a brand." And then we're silly. We go ahead and do it, and then he goes, "Well, I don't know. Is that what I want? Does that really represent?" And designers, good designers, some people just decorate. They're just trying to make sure it's balanced and it's pretty. But a good designer can take that information and interpret it into the right type of fonts that communicate the right colors, the right logo itself that helps bring that out. Mm-hmm. And I think whenever we don't look at it that way, we end up with something we'll change later. And you're not just changing the mark, you're changing equity and everything you've done so far. And you don't want to do that. It seems easy to do it first. It costs a lot later.
Well, if we accept that customers want what they want and not what we want them to want, so we need to study them and figure that out. When you go to a store, should similar products end up looking a lot the same? Like if you're buying work gloves, are they all going to end up with green and yellow square tags on them, or how do you differentiate when the consumer base is the same as that other products?
A good example of that would be like Peak Refill. I don't know if you know Peak. They compete against Mountain House and so forth, and they've done extremely well. But as we talked to customers, they were looking for more protein, better taste. They were looking for a product that would help them when they're hiking and out there. And by knowing that, then on the package, when we created the brand mark, the PEAK, it had a compass in the A.
I actually am familiar with them. I recognize it now,
Also, showing a really great tasting meal. Does it look like that when I use it and put it out? Not really, but most of the hamburgers we buy don't really look like that hamburger in the picture. But by knowing what they're most interested in is called a priority of read. Some of it can be pictures, some's brand. Some are the highlighted, the top things. But if you don't know the top 3 things they're looking for in the package, what bullet points do you put on a package? Are you going to get them right? And so I think those are the mistakes I think that hurt the most. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're focusing on consumers, which you should do when creating a brand. But there are other audiences. So what about investors? Do investors care about a branding for a company? Have you had any experience with that?
What I think I found is investors want to know that all this is thought out. Mm-hmm. So if I have someone who is selling a franchise and they show them the Master Autotech playbook, where it takes them through everything that they believe in, what their stores are going to look like, what's going to be on the interior, what the brand is, what it stands for, I think an investor, I know a franchisee purchaser goes, "Oh, I really want to fall into that. My little mechanic shop doesn't look like that, and so I'd like to buy into a franchise." And investors, I think the ones who are going to hold on for 3 to 5 years, they would like it to already be. They want to know everything they can, and if I can look through 80 pages in a book, and not just with their financials, but I look through and say, "Hey, this company knows where they're going. They look good. I love their culture. That's something, and I think I can sell that. They have more information to go out and do that. So we've seen that investors sometimes can be short-sighted, but again, the playbook is fun because for an owner, it might be the first time he's ever seen it all in one place.
Yeah.
And then when you're talking to a videographer who's going to come in and shoot a video, he reads through all of it and he goes, okay, I understand that. And I've got your graphics and the three most important things are this. Here's how I'd approach that. Again, it's everybody rowing in the same direction and you go a lot faster that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever rode a boat with a kid.
Yeah.
But you just kind of go in circles. And I'm afraid sometimes that's what happens.
Yeah. And so you mentioned franchisors, franchisees. So that's another audience. By the time, if you like, we did an episode with Sub-Zero. By the time you get your business to where you're franchising, at that point you're going to have the branding in place, right?
Right. And what do our posters look like? What do our menus look like? If they're going to go out and promote, which they want to, or you're paying for their promotion as part of the franchise, the more they know about all of it. One of our franchises, we just did a bunch of T-shirts for them because they want to give out T-shirts to the employees that run. They've got like 25 franchises. All of that builds equity both internally and having a culture and being able to say, even when you hire someone, if you've got a section in there that's a culture section and it's 6-8 pages long, explains who you are, what you believe in, hiring a new employee, it's a little bit easier to go through and say, well, what do you think about this? And you start out with a better employee than you would have had they not understood your culture and who you are. Yeah. So culture is a brand element.
Yeah, and here in the tech transfer office, I can't say we've fully done our branding, but when we got an outside, outward-facing logo, and when we put our culture document in place, I do think that made a difference internally. It got us more on the page. What is the effect on employees of good branding?
I think they're proud of it. Like the fencing specialist down in Vegas, they're excited. They feel like, I love the way this looks. We even had with one of our other customers down there where one of the workers, they've got maybe 300 employees, he tattooed the logo on his shoulder. And I thought, wow, what a testament of I believe in this. And most companies that are successful are able to keep employees a long time. So when they introduce a brand, whether it's a city or it's a manufacturing company, and everybody wears that brand, it builds pride. And if you can train them and teach them, here's our culture, here's how we handle a problem. The companies who do really well, everyone in a company is a salesman. If they're out working with somebody and they go, yeah, I work for so-and-so, and sometimes they just hate working there. And I sometimes don't know if we do the best job compared to, I love working here. And this is neat. I feel part of a family, and we do top door work. We never, if it's a problem, we fix it. If it's this, we do that. That builds more sales in a way that, not having that internal culture. And a visual brand becomes something they can grab onto,
Well, I mean, I work at BYU, and we have a very strong brand. I think I know exactly what my organization stands for, and that does make a difference. It affects who comes here. It affects what it's like working here. So really valuable. So, well, great. Well, thanks for your time, Rushford. This has been super interesting. Before we close, if people want to get in contact with you or REDKOR, what's the best way to do that?
You can go to our site, REDKORBrands.com.
And it's REDKOR.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. We've got REDKOR.com. I haven't bought it yet, but I think it should be easier.
Okay.
Also, you can just give me a call. You can call me direct if you want to, 801-372-0213.
Okay.
And you can look us up. If you go to Google, you'll find us there.
Okay. Well, thanks for being accessible. And then just last take, if you can give people one reason why they ought to take a few minutes and think about branding, what is it?
Branding is everything about your company. It's what you look like. It's how you market. It's how you message. It's your culture. And all of that ought to be in one place. Because what happens if you don't is someone who's going to come in and do your email drip campaign, he has his ideas about what you ought to be doing. The guy doing your video has their ideas, and they start over from scratch. Whereas if they can start understanding and knowing who you are, a real brand, not just visually, but marketing, messaging, culture, if you have all of that, everybody's rowing in the same direction. And that really makes a big difference in how fast you can grow and how well you can grow.
Wow, it's kind of like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg wearing the same clothes every day. Let's just get rid of decisions we don't need to make a million times and make them one time, right?
Yeah, I always wear Levi's and a black shirt, and someone will say, why do you wear a black shirt? And well, the practical reasons are If I spill, I can get rid of it. I
Yeah.
don't look quite as fat as I really am.
Yeah, that's right.
Put a coat on and it works out fine. But yeah, there's just knowing who you are is hard enough, and then sticking to it. A brand needs to be consistent, build equity.
Okay.
So,
Perfect. Well, great message. Thanks again, Rushford.
all
Really
right.
appreciate
Well,
it.
thanks for inviting me.
You bet.